The stake hit earth with a sound like a drum, and Astrid's hand caught the mallet on its backswing before the surveyor could drive it deeper into her pasture. The man looked up, startled, his face flushed from exertion and the thin air of the high summer Alp. He was perhaps 30, lean and sun-browned, with a leather satchel across his chest and ink stains on his fingers. Behind him, a line of wooden stakes marched across the meadow in a perfectly straight diagonal, cutting through the best grazing land Astrid had on this side of the mountain. "You cannot put that there," she said, still gripping the mallet handle. He blinked at her, then at his hand where the tool had been a moment before. "I apologize, miss, but I have authorization from the Territorial Road Commission. We are surveying the new pass route to connect the valley settlements with the eastern markets." "I know what you are doing," Astrid said. "I am telling you that you cannot put it there." She released the mallet and straightened to her full height, which brought her eyes nearly level with his. Her green skin caught the mountain sunlight in a way that made humans uncomfortable, she knew, and her small tusks were visible even when her mouth was closed. She wore a rough linen smock over wool leggings, both stained with whey and grass, and her dark hair was tied back with twine. The surveyor took the mallet carefully, as though worried she might snatch it again. "The route has been planned by engineers in the capital. It follows the most efficient grade over the mountain. It follows a line on a map drawn by someone who has never been here," Astrid said. "This meadow is the only place above the tree line where the soil is deep enough for good grass. The rest is rock and scrub. If you put a road through the middle of it, I lose half my grazing." "I understand that is difficult," he said, and something in his voice suggested he actually meant it. "But the road will bring commerce through these mountains. There will be travelers who need provisions, places to stay." "I do not need commerce," Astrid interrupted. "I need grass for my cows." He studied her for a moment, then glanced back at the stakes he had already planted, then up at the stone hut that sat squat and solid 50 paces away, smoke rising from its chimney hole. "You run this Alp alone?" "Yes." "All season?" "Yes." He seemed to consider this. "That must be considerable work." "It is the work I know how to do." Astrid crossed her arms. "And I cannot do it if you build a road through my pasture." The surveyor set down his mallet and pulled a folded map from his satchel, spreading it across a nearby boulder. "Here," he said, pointing. "This is the route. It needs to maintain a grade of no more than 1 in 12 to accommodate loaded wagons. The pass itself is here, and the approach from your side requires this specific line to avoid the cliffs to the north and the bog to the south." Astrid leaned over the map, frowning. She could read well enough her mother had taught her before she died, but maps were different from the land itself. The lines and symbols did not show where the wind carved snowdrifts in winter, or where springs bubbled up to make the ground too soft for hooves, or which slopes held the sun longest in autumn. "Your map is wrong," she said finally. "I beg your pardon. It shows flat ground here." She pointed. "That is not flat. There are 3 boulder fields you would have to clear, and the drainage runs straight across in spring. You would need to build up the roadbed or it would wash out every year." The surveyor leaned closer, his shoulder nearly touching hers. He smelled like paper and sweat and something else, something cleaner that might have been soap. "Are you certain?" "I walk every hand of this mountain," Astrid said. "I am certain." He pulled out a small leather notebook and a pencil. "Could you show me on the map where the boulder fields are?" She traced the areas with one blunt finger, and he made notes in the margins, his handwriting small and precise. When she finished, he looked up at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Thank you," he said. "That is genuinely helpful. I will need to verify the grades, but if you are right, this might save the company considerable expense in roadbed preparation." Astrid did not know what to say to that. She had expected him to dismiss her, or to insist that his map was correct because it had been drawn by educated men in offices. Instead, he was writing down what she said as though it mattered. "The stakes still cannot go there," she said, because it seemed important to remember why they were arguing in the first place. "No," he agreed. "I see that now. But I will still need to survey the route the engineer specified, even if I recommend changes. It is my job." "Then do your job somewhere else." "I would," he said, "but there is nowhere else. The next settlement is 2 days' walk down the mountain, and I need to survey from here to the pass before the weather turns. Is there an inn or a farm that takes boarders?" "No. A barn, perhaps. I have a bedroll." Astrid looked at him, at his city clothes and his clean hands and his earnest expression, and felt a familiar weight settle in her chest. She should say no. She should send him back down the mountain and let him figure out his own problems. That was what any sensible person would do when a stranger showed up to destroy their livelihood. But the stone hut had 2 rooms, and the back room was empty except for the cheese aging on its shelves, and there was a spare pallet in the loft above the main room that she used when the weather was too cold to sleep below. And he had listened when she talked about the land, had written down what she said, had not called her a liar or a savage. "5 copper a week," she said. "You sleep in the loft, you do not touch my cheese, and you stay out of my way when I am working." His face broke into a smile, sudden and warm. "Thank you. That is more than generous. My name is Marcus Jennings, by the way." Astrid Nordheim. They shook hands, his grip firm and brief, and then he gathered up his surveying tools and followed her toward the hut. The dairy was simple but solid, built from mountain stone with a slate roof that overhung far enough to shed heavy snow. Inside, the main room held a table, 2 stools, a rope bed piled with sheepskins, and a hearth where a pot of whey hung over low flames. The air smelled of wood smoke and cultured milk, and the wild thyme Astrid scattered on the floor. A ladder led up to the loft, which was really just a sleeping platform tucked under the rafters. "There is water in the barrel by the door," Astrid said. "I bring it from the spring each morning. If you use the last of it, you fetch more. There is bread in the crock, and you can cut cheese from the wheel on the table, but the rounds in the back room are not to be touched. I make breakfast when the sun hits the east window and supper when the cows come in. If you want to eat with me, you are welcome. If not, stay clear of the hearth while I am cooking." Marcus set his satchel down carefully, looking around the room with the same attention he had given the map. "This is well made. How old is it?" 70 years, perhaps 80. "It was here when my grandfather took the grazing lease from the Valley Commons. And you inherited the lease?" "Yes." Astrid moved to the hearth and stirred the whey, not looking at him. "I am the only one left." She did not elaborate, and he did not press. Instead, he asked if he could store his instruments in the corner, and when she nodded, he arranged them with tidy precision. The transit on its tripod, the measuring chains coiled just so, the ranging poles standing like spears against the wall. "I will need to work early," he said. "The light is best in the morning for sighting angles. I will try not to wake you." "I wake when the stars are still out," Astrid said. "The cows need milking at first light. You will not disturb me." He nodded, then climbed up to inspect the loft. Astrid heard him moving around above, testing the boards, and then he came back down with dust in his hair. "It is perfect," he said. "Truly, thank you." That night they ate bread and cheese and a stew Astrid made from dried peas and smoked mutton. Marcus tried to help, but she waved him off. Her kitchen was too small for 2 people, and he did not know where anything was kept. So he sat at the table and watched her work, and when the food was ready, He ate with the concentration of someone who had been living on trail rations for too long. "This is excellent," he said. "Do you make the cheese yourself?" "Yes." "How many cows do you run?" 16 milking, plus followers and a bull." He looked surprised. "That is a substantial herd for one person." "It is the work I know," Astrid said again. "My mother taught me." "Where are the cows now?" "In the high pasture, past the ridge. They will come back on their own when the light starts to fail." Cows are creatures of habit. Marcus smiled at that, a quick flash of warmth. "I suppose we all are." After supper, he offered to wash the dishes, and this time Astrid let him. He worked efficiently, heating water in the kettle and scrubbing each bowl clean with a rag. When he finished, he pulled out his field notebook and sat near the hearth, sketching something by the light of the fire. Astrid tried not to watch him. She had evening work, there was always evening work, but her eyes kept drifting to the table where he bent over his page, his pencil moving in quick, sure strokes. After a while he glanced up and caught her looking. "I am mapping what you told me this afternoon," he said, turning the notebook so she could see. "The boulder fields and the drainage patterns. Does this match what you meant?" She came closer, studying the drawing. It was not like the official survey map with its rigid lines and abstract symbols. This was something else, a sketch that showed the actual shape of the land, the way the ground rose and fell, the placement of stones and streams. He had drawn it from her words alone, and he had drawn it right. "Yes," she said. "That is correct. Good." He made one more note, then closed the book. "I will walk it tomorrow to verify the grades. Would you mind if I asked you questions as I work? You know this mountain better than any map." Astrid felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. "You may ask." Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Astrid woke in the dark and went out to bring in the cows, and by the time she had them settled in the stone milking shed behind the hut, Marcus was up and boiling water for tea. She milked while the sky turned gray, then pink, then gold, and he drank his tea standing in the doorway, watching the light spill down the mountain. After milking came the cheese work. Astrid heated the morning milk in a great copper kettle, adding rennet and culture, stirring until the curds formed and separated from the whey. Marcus asked if he could watch, and she nodded, so he stood to the side with his notebook and sketched while she worked. His pencil caught the curve of her arms as she lifted the curd mass, the concentration on her face as she judged the texture, the steam rising from the kettle in soft coils. She did not notice the sketches at first. She was too focused on the work, on keeping the temperature right and the timing precise. Making cheese was half knowledge and half instinct, and it demanded all her attention. When the curds were pressed, and the whey set aside for the pigs, Marcus would gather his surveying tools and head out across the pasture. Sometimes Astrid went with him, showing him where the ground was solid and where it would turn to mud in a thaw, pointing out the paths the deer used and the places where rockslides had come down in past winters. He measured and calculated and drove his stakes, and she watched him work with the same attention he gave to her cheese making. He was good at what he did, she realized. He did not just follow the lines on the map. He looked at the land itself, tested the soil, sighted angles from multiple positions to ensure accuracy. And he listened when she spoke, writing down her observations as though they were as valuable as his instruments. "Why did you become a surveyor?" She asked one afternoon as they stood on a rocky outcrop, looking down at the valley below. Marcus adjusted the transit, squinting through the eyepiece. "My father was a cartographer. I grew up with maps all over the house, and I loved the idea that you could take something as vast and complicated as the world and make sense of it on paper. But I wanted to see the places I was mapping, not just draw them from other people's notes. So I apprenticed with a survey crew and learned the field work. He made a note in his book, then looked at her. Why did you become a cheesemaker? I did not become one, Astrid said. I was born to it. My family has held this grazing lease for 3 generations. My grandfather built the hut, my mother ran the herd, and now I do. Did you never want to do something else? The question caught her off guard. What else would I do? I don't know. Anything. You are clearly intelligent and capable. You could manage a farm or run a business, or I am an orc, Astrid said flatly. People in the valley do not hire orcs to manage their farms or run their businesses. They barely tolerate us living on the mountain. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I am sorry. That was thoughtless of me. It is the truth. Astrid looked out at the valley, at the patchwork of fields and the ribbon of river and the distant smudge of the town. Here, I am alone. I do not have to see the way they look at me or hear what they say. The cows do not care that I am green, and the cheese sells well enough that the merchants will deal with me. It is a life. It is more than that, Marcus said quietly. It is a good life. Hard but honest. There is worth in that. Astrid glanced at him, trying to read his expression. He sounded sincere, but she had learned not to trust easy words. People said things they did not mean all the time, especially to her. Still, as the days passed, Marcus proved oddly consistent. He woke early without complaint, kept his corner of the hut tidy, and never touched her cheese stores. He fetched water when the barrel ran low, split firewood without being asked, and once fixed the latch on the milking shed door when he noticed it was loose. In the evenings he sat by the hearth and worked in his field book, sometimes sketching, sometimes calculating grades and distances, occasionally reading aloud from a book of poetry he carried in his satchel. Astrid found herself looking forward to those evenings. The hut felt less empty with someone else in it, and Marcus had a voice that suited poetry, clear and measured. He never asked her to talk when she did not want to, but he seemed pleased when she did, leaning forward with that same focused attention he gave to everything. "Do you have family in the city?" she asked one night, watching him sketch. "A sister," he said. "She is married to a printer. They have 3 children, all girls, all loud." He smiled. "I visit when I can, but I am on the road most of the year. Do you like that, being on the road?" "I like the work," Marcus said, "and I like seeing new places, but it can be lonely." He glanced up at her. "What about you? Do you have anyone in the valley?" "No, friends." "No, that must be difficult." Astrid shrugged. "It is what I know." Marcus looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he returned to his sketching. After a while he tore a page from his notebook, crumpled it, and tossed it into the fire. Astrid saw a flash of green and tusks before the paper blackened and curled. "What was that?" she asked. "Nothing." A failed drawing. But the next night she saw him sketching again, the same concentrated expression on his face, and this time when he paused to sharpen his pencil, she glimpsed the page. It was her, standing at the cheese kettle with her sleeves rolled up and her hair escaping its tie, rendered in quick, confident lines. She must have made a sound, because Marcus looked up, then down at the notebook, then back at her. His ears went red. "I apologize," he said quickly. "I should have asked permission. It is a habit. I sketch what I see, and you are here, and the light is good. I can stop if it bothers you." Astrid stared at the drawing. He had captured something she did not recognize. A woman who looked strong and focused, her hands sure on the ladle, her expression calm. It did not look like the orc girl people in the valley whispered about, the one they called plain and coarse and barely civilized. "Why do you draw me?" she asked. Marcus set down his pencil. "Because you are interesting to draw. The way you move when you work, it is efficient, no wasted motion. And your face is expressive even when you think you are hiding what you feel. It is good practice for me." "Practice," Astrid repeated. Yes. For figure drawing. I'm not very skilled at it yet, but I am trying to improve. She looked at the sketch again. May I see the others? He hesitated, then handed her the notebook. She paged through it slowly. There were maps and calculations and notes about grades and drainage, but in the margins of nearly every page were small drawings. Astrid milking a cow, Astrid carrying a water bucket, Astrid standing on the ridge with the wind in her hair. In every one, she looked like someone worth drawing. These are not practice, she said quietly. Marcus took the notebook back, his fingers brushing hers. No, he admitted, they are not. He did not elaborate, and Astrid did not ask, but something shifted between them that night, a thread pulled taut. The next afternoon, Marcus came back from surveying with a troubled expression. He set down his equipment and stood in the doorway, looking out at the meadow where his stakes marched in their straight, terrible line. I need to tell you something, he said. The survey is nearly complete, and my report is due to the road commission in 3 weeks. When I submit it, they will begin clearing the route before winter. Astrid felt her stomach tighten. I know. I have recommended modifications based on what you showed me, avoiding the boulder fields, adjusting for drainage, but the core route remains the same, through your best pasture. He turned to face her. I am sorry. I know this is your livelihood, and I wish there were another way, but the engineers were clear about the requirements. The grade has to stay within tolerance, and this is the only line that works. You are saying you cannot help me. I am saying I don't know how to help you, Marcus said. I have looked at every alternative. There is no other route that meets the specifications. Astrid crossed her arms, fighting down a surge of anger. You said the map was wrong. You said my information was valuable. It is valuable. It will save the company money and prevent future problems. But it does not change the fundamental geometry of the pass. He took a step toward her. If there were any other way, I would find it. You have to believe that. Why should I believe you? The words came out sharper than she intended. You work for the people who are taking my land. You have been living in my house, eating my food, drawing pictures of me like I am something pretty to look at, and all the while you knew this was coming. Did you think I would not notice? Did you think I was too stupid to understand? No, Marcus said, his voice rising to match hers. I think you understand perfectly well, and I think you have every right to be angry. But I did not lie to you. I told you from the first day what I was here to do. You told me you were surveying a road. You did not tell me you were the weapon that would destroy everything I have. The words hung between them, heavy and true. Marcus flinched as though she had struck him. You are right, he said finally. That is exactly what I am, and I hate it. He sat down on the doorstep, his shoulders slumping. This is my 6th survey this year. Do you know what the others were? A rail line through a fishing village. A canal that flooded farm fields. A logging road into a forest where people had been harvesting maple syrup for generations. Every time I show up with my instruments and my maps, and I measure the most efficient route, and people lose their homes, their livelihoods, their history. And every time I tell myself it is progress, that these projects will bring prosperity, that the good outweighs the harm. But then I meet people like you, and I don't know any more. Astrid stood very still. Then why do you keep doing it? Because I owe the road company 3 more years of service to pay off my surveying equipment and my training. And because if I quit, they will just send someone else, someone who will not care about boulder fields or drainage or whose pasture gets cut in half. He looked up at her. At least I try to do less harm. Less harm, Astrid said bitterly. That is a small comfort when I am watching my herd starve next winter. I know. They did not speak for the rest of the day. Astrid threw herself into work, scrubbing the cheese molds until her hands were raw, hauling water she did not need, spending hours in the high pasture just to be away from the hut. When she finally came back at dusk, Marcus had made supper bread and cheese and boiled eggs, but she ate in silence and went to bed without looking at him. She woke in the middle of the night to the sound of pacing. The loft creaked as Marcus walked back and forth, as regular as a clock. She lay in the dark, listening, and wondered if he was wrestling with his conscience or just planning his next survey. In the morning he was gone. His equipment was still in the corner, but he was not in the hut or the milking shed or anywhere in sight. Astrid milked the cows and made the cheese and tried not to care where he was. He came back at midday, sweating and wind-burned, with his satchel slung across his chest. He went straight to the table and spread out his map, then pulled a fresh sheet of paper and began to sketch. "What are you doing?" Astrid asked, despite herself. "Looking for another route," Marcus said, not glancing up. "You said I was wrong to give up, so I am not giving up." "I did not say that. You did not have to." Astrid watched him work. He drew quickly, his pencil flying across the page, marking elevations and grades and distances. Every few minutes he would curse under his breath and crumple the paper, then start again. "There has to be a way," he muttered. "There has to be something I missed. You said there was no other route." "I said there was no other route that met the specifications, but specifications can be challenged. If I can find a route that is better, genuinely superior, the chief engineer will have to consider it." "Better how?" "Shorter, safer, easier to maintain." He looked up at her, his eyes bright. "You know this mountain better than anyone. If there is another way over, you would know it. Is there another pass?" Astrid hesitated. "There might be. Show me." She led him up the mountain, past the high pasture where the cows grazed, up into the rocky country above the tree line where only moss and lichen grew. The air was thin and cold, and the wind had a bite to it even in summer. Marcus followed without complaint, his breath coming hard but his pace steady. They climbed for 2 hours, scrambling over scree and crossing narrow defiles, until they reached a saddle between 2 peaks. Astrid stopped and pointed north. "There," she said. "That is the shepherd's door. Old route from before the valley road was built. Herders used to bring their flocks through in autumn, down to the winter pastures on the other side." Marcus stared at the gap in the ridgeline, his expression intent. Why did they stop using it? Rockfall closed the eastern approach. Too dangerous for animals. She started toward the pass, and he followed. The western side of the shepherd's door was a steep but manageable slope, scattered with loose stone but passable. The eastern side was something else entirely. The old path was gone, buried under a slope of broken rock that spilled down from the cliffs above. It looked treacherous, unstable, the kind of terrain that could shift and slide with every step. Marcus pulled out his instruments and began to measure. He took angles and grades, sketched the topography, made pages of calculations. Astrid sat on a boulder and watched him work, the wind tugging at her hair. "It is too steep," he said finally. "Even if we cleared the rockfall, the grade on the eastern approach is nearly 1 in 8. No loaded wagon could manage it. What if you cut into the slope, make it longer and gentler? That would require blasting, a lot of blasting, and shoring up the new roadbed with retaining walls." He chewed his lips, staring at his notes. "It would be expensive. More expensive than cutting through my pasture. In terms of initial construction, yes. But—" he trailed off, flipping back through his field book. "But in terms of long-term maintenance, maybe not. The route through your pasture has drainage problems and unstable subsurface in 3 places. It would need constant repair. And it is longer by almost half a mile, which means more grading, more clearing, more bridge work over the streams." He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to sketch again, this time with fierce concentration. Astrid watched the drawing take shape. A route that swung north from the valley, climbed to the shepherd's door, and descended the eastern slope in a series of long switchbacks carved into the mountainside. "If I can show that this route is shorter, safer, and cheaper to maintain," Marcus said slowly, "and if I can demonstrate that the engineering challenges are solvable, the chief engineer might approve it. He would have to, if the numbers are sound. The company cares about costs above all else. And if he does not approve it, then I submit the original survey. The road goes through your pasture, and I have wasted both our time." He looked at her. "But I have to try." They spent the next week surveying the shepherd's door route. Marcus measured every foot of the approach, calculated volumes of rock that would need to be moved, estimated the costs of blasting and construction. Astrid guided him through the mountain, showing him where water ran in spring and where snow would drift in winter, pointing out the places where the rock was solid and where it was fractured. It was hard work, harder than the original survey, and they were both exhausted by evening. But there was something different now, a sense of common purpose. They were not surveyor and victim anymore. They were collaborators working toward the same goal. One evening, Marcus sat by the fire with his field book open, adding up columns of figures. Astrid sat across from him, mending a torn shirt. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the scratch of his pencil and the pop of the fire. "It might work," he said suddenly. "The numbers are close, but I think it might actually work. The shepherd's door route is shorter by 2,000 feet, and even with the additional construction costs, the long-term savings in maintenance could justify it." Astrid set down her sewing. "You sound surprised." "I am. I have been doing this work for 5 years, and I have never found a better alternative to the planned route, not once. But you did. You knew this mountain well enough to see what no engineer could." "I have lived here my whole life," Astrid said. "Of course I know it. That is not the same thing." Marcus closed his notebook and leaned forward. "Plenty of people live in a place without truly knowing it. They see what they need to see and ignore the rest. But you pay attention. You notice things. That is a gift." Astrid felt heat rise in her face and looked down at her sewing. "It is just what I do." "It is more than that," Marcus said quietly. "You are remarkable, Astrid." The words settled over her like a weight. She did not know what to do with them, so she picked up her sewing again and focused on threading the needle. The next morning, Marcus announced that he needed to return to the valley to submit his survey and present the alternative route to the chief engineer. "I will be gone at least a week, maybe 2, he said. "It depends on how long it takes to get a meeting and whether they require additional verification. And if they reject your proposal, then I will submit the original survey as planned." He met her eyes. "But I will try everything I can to convince them first." Astrid nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. Marcus gathered his instruments and his notes, packing everything carefully into his satchel and a leather case. When he was ready, he stood in the doorway, looking back at her. "Thank you," he said, "for showing me the shepherd's door. For trusting me enough to try." "I have not decided if I trust you," Astrid said. "Fair enough." He smiled, that quick warm flash. "I will be back as soon as I can." After he left, the hut felt too quiet. Astrid threw herself into work, but even the familiar rhythm of milking and cheese-making could not distract her. She kept thinking about his drawings, his careful measurements, the way he listened when she spoke. She kept wondering if he would actually fight for the alternative route, or if he would take the easy path and submit the original survey. She kept wondering what it would mean if he did come back. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The weather turned cooler, and the first yellow leaves appeared on the aspens down below the tree line. Astrid began to think he was not coming back at all. Perhaps the company had sent him to another job. Or perhaps he had simply decided that fighting for an orc woman's pasture was not worth the trouble. Then, on a gray afternoon with rain threatening, she saw a figure climbing the path from the valley. She recognized his gait before she could make out his face, the long, steady stride of someone used to covering ground. Marcus looked thinner than she remembered and tired. He set down his pack and stood looking at her, his expression uncertain. "You came back," Astrid said. "I said I would." "People say many things." "I know." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded document. The chief engineer approved the shepherd's door route. Work will begin next spring. Astrid took the document with numb fingers. It was covered in official stamps and signatures, dense with technical language she did not fully understand. But the map was clear enough. A line that swung north, away from her pasture, over the shepherd's door and down the eastern slope. "They approved it," she said, not quite believing. "It took some convincing. I had to present the full cost analysis 3 times, and I brought in a senior engineer to verify the grades. But in the end, the numbers were too good to ignore. Your route will save the company money, and it will be a safer, more reliable road." He paused. "You saved your pasture, Astrid." She looked up at him, at his tired face and ink-stained fingers and the hope in his eyes. "We saved it," she said. "You did the work. I just measured what you showed me." "That is not true, and you know it," Marcus smiled. "All right, we saved it together." Astrid felt something crack open in her chest, a flood of relief and gratitude and something else, something she did not have a name for. She wanted to thank him, to tell him what this meant, but the words would not come. Instead she said, "You look hungry. Come inside and I will make supper." That night, they ate together by the fire, and Marcus told her about his weeks in the valley. The meetings with the road commission, the arguments with engineers who did not want to revise their plans, the final presentation where the chief engineer had grudgingly admitted that the shepherd's door route was superior. "They want to credit you in the official report," Marcus said. "The chief engineer insists on acknowledging the source of the alternative route. He wants to include your name and a note that you provided essential local knowledge." Astrid nearly dropped her spoon. Why would he do that? "Because it is the truth, and because he is an honest man in his way. He does not like being wrong, but he will not take credit for someone else's work." "I am an orc," Astrid said. "People do not credit orcs for anything. Then this will be the first time." Marcus leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "The report will be published and distributed to every settlement along the new road. People will know that an orc herder surveyed a route that trained engineers missed. That means something." Astrid did not know if it meant what he thought it meant, but she could see that he believed it, and that was enough for now. Later, when the fire had burned down to embers, Marcus pulled out his field book. "May I show you something?" She nodded, and he handed her the notebook, open to a page near the back. It was a drawing of her, but not like the others. This one was full page, carefully rendered with shading and detail. She was standing on the ridge above the shepherd's door, looking out at the mountains, and the expression on her face was one of fierce, quiet strength. Beneath the drawing, in Marcus's precise handwriting, were 2 words: "She is beautiful." Astrid stared at the page. Her throat felt tight. "When did you draw this?" "The day we found the shepherd's door. I finished it while I was in the valley." He paused. "I meant to give it to you when I got back, but I lost my nerve." "Why?" "Because I did not know how you would react. And because I did not want you to think I was trying to flatter you or manipulate you or—" "Marcus," Astrid interrupted. She looked up at him, at his earnest, worried face. "Why did you write this?" "Because it is true," he said simply. "I know you do not believe it. I know someone at some point convinced you otherwise. But they were wrong. You are beautiful, Astrid. You are strong and capable and intelligent, and when you work, or when you talk about the mountain, or when you smile, which you almost never do, you are the most beautiful person I have ever seen." The words hit her like a blow. She stared down at the drawing, at the woman Marcus had rendered with such care, and felt something inside her begin to shake. "I am not," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I am plain. Everyone has always said so, even my mother." She stopped, unable to continue. "What did your mother say?" "She named me Astrid because it means sturdy. Not beautiful, not graceful, sturdy like a work horse." The old hurt rose up, sharp and familiar. "She said I had a plain face and a plain manner, and that I should be grateful for the work because no one would want me for anything else." Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very gentle. "Then your mother was wrong. Or perhaps she was trying to protect you in a hard world. But either way, she was wrong about what you are." Astrid looked up at him, her vision blurred. "How can you say that? You barely know me." "I know enough. I have watched you work every day for a month. I have seen how you care for your animals, how you read the land, how you solve problems. I have seen you angry and determined and generous, even when you had every reason not to be. And I have seen you beautiful, over and over again, until I could not stop drawing you." He reached across the table and touched her hand very carefully. "You asked me once why I draw you. This is why. Because you are beautiful, and I wanted to capture it before I had to leave." The tears spilled over then, hot and unexpected. Astrid wiped at them roughly, embarrassed, but they kept coming. Marcus moved around the table and knelt beside her chair, and when she did not pull away, he put his arms around her. She leaned into him, shaking, and he held her while she cried. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with kindness, so long since anyone had said anything that made her feel like more than a pair of working hands. She did not know how to accept it, did not know if she could trust it, but in that moment, she was too tired to push it away. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back, scrubbing at her face. "I am sorry, that was foolish." "It was not foolish," Marcus said. He was still kneeling beside her, his hands resting lightly on her arms. "And you have nothing to apologize for." Astrid took a shaky breath. "I do not know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." But she did, because the words were building up inside her and she could not keep them in any longer. "When you first came here, I thought you were just another person who would take what they wanted and leave. And then I thought maybe you were different, but I did not trust it. I have been alone for so long that I forgot how to be anything else." "You are not alone now," Marcus said quietly. "For how long?" The question came out more sharply than she intended. "The survey is done. The route is approved." "What reason do you have to stay?" Marcus looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "What if I wanted to stay anyway?" Astrid's heart lurched. "You have a job. You owe the road company 3 more years." "I owe them 2 more years and 7 months, Marcus corrected. "And yes, they will send me to other surveys, but the Shepherd's Door route will take at least a year to build, and someone will need to be here to supervise, to make sure the construction matches the survey. I am the surveyor of record. It should be me. And after that, I will have 1 year and 7 months left on my contract, and then I will be free to do whatever I want." He took a breath. "Astrid, I know this is sudden. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but if you would let me, if you would be willing, I would like to stay here with you, for as long as you will have me." She stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "Why?" "Because I am happy here. Because this is the first place in years that has felt like more than just another job. Because when I think about leaving and never seeing you again, it feels like losing something irreplaceable." He squeezed her hands gently. "Because I am falling in love with you, and I think I have been since the day you grabbed my mallet and told me I could not stake your pasture." Astrid opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You are falling in love with me," she repeated, as though saying it aloud would make it make sense. "Yes, I am an orc. I know, people will say terrible things. They will call you a traitor and worse. I know that too." Marcus smiled a little ruefully. "I have spent 2 weeks in the valley listening to people's opinions about orcs. I know exactly what they will say, and I don't care. You should care. It will make your life difficult. My life is already difficult. I spend half the year living in tents and breaking up other people's land for a company that does not care who it hurts. If I am going to have a difficult life, I would rather have one that means something." Astrid felt her defenses crumbling. "I do not know how to do this." "I have never, no one has ever, neither have I," Marcus said. "Not like this. We can figure it out together." She looked down at their joined hands, his tan fingers wrapped around her green ones. It should have looked wrong or strange or impossible. Instead, it just looked right. "I am afraid," she admitted. "So am I. What if it does not work? Then at least we will have tried." He shifted, still kneeling, and looked up at her with those steady eyes. "Astrid, I am not asking you to decide everything right now. I am just asking if you are willing to see where this goes. If you want me to leave, I will leave. But if you want me to stay, if you think you might be able to care for me the way I care for you, then I will stay, and we will work out the rest as it comes." Astrid thought about the long winter ahead, the cold nights and the quiet days and the endless work. She thought about doing it alone, the way she always had, or doing it with someone who saw her as beautiful. She thought about trust and risk, and the terrifying possibility of letting someone in. "Stay," she said. Marcus's face broke into a smile so wide and bright it made her chest ache. "Yes. Yes, stay for the winter. We will see how it goes." He stood and pulled her up with him, and then he was hugging her, tight and warm and real. Astrid hugged him back, feeling the solid weight of him, the proof that this was actually happening. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus was still grinning. "I should warn you, I am terrible at milking cows. I know, I have watched you try. And I have never made cheese in my life. I will teach you. I snore. I know that too, the loft is not as soundproof as you think." He laughed, and she found herself smiling, a real smile that felt strange and good on her face. That night, Marcus stayed below instead of climbing to the loft. They sat by the fire talking until the embers died, and then Astrid made up the spare pallet and set it near the hearth. It was not quite sharing a bed, but it was not quite separate either, and it felt like the right amount of closeness for a beginning. In the morning, she taught him how to milk a cow. He was as bad at it as she had expected, but he kept trying, his face screwed up in concentration as he coaxed thin streams of milk into the bucket. The cow looked back at him with patient disdain. "I think she is judging me," Marcus said. "She is definitely judging you. Does it get easier?" "Eventually. It took me 3 years before my hands stopped cramping." Marcus groaned, but he kept at it, and by the end of the week he could manage a passable milking, though it took him twice as long as it took Astrid. He was better at cheese making. He had the patience for it, and the attention to detail, and he did not mind the repetitive stirring and checking and waiting. They worked side by side at the kettle, and Astrid found herself explaining things she had never put into words before. How to tell when the curd was ready to cut, how to judge the temperature by the steam, how to press the cheese so it would age properly. "You are a good teacher," Marcus said one afternoon, watching her demonstrate the proper way to turn a wheel. "You are a good student. I have excellent motivation." He leaned over and kissed her cheek, quick and light. Astrid froze. It was the first time he had kissed her, and even though it was just a peck, just a friendly gesture, it sent heat flooding through her. "Sorry," Marcus said, pulling back. "Was that all right?" "Yes," Astrid said, and then, because she did not want him to think she was just being polite, "Do it again." He did, slower this time, his lips warm against her skin. Then he kissed her other cheek and her forehead and finally, carefully, her mouth. Astrid had never been kissed before. She did not know what to do with her hands or where to put her nose or how long it was supposed to last. But Marcus was patient and gentle, and when she finally relaxed into it, she discovered that kissing was not as complicated as she had feared. It was just another way of being close, another language they could learn together. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "That was nice," Marcus said. "Yes," Astrid agreed. "We should do it again sometime. How about now? I am covered in whey. I don't care." So they kissed again. There in the cheese room with the smell of cultured milk and the warmth of the fire, and Astrid felt something settle into place inside her, a sense of rightness she had never expected to find. The road construction began in early spring, as soon as the snow melted enough to bring equipment up the valley. The chief engineer came himself to oversee the initial survey verification, a stern man with iron-gray hair and a reputation for perfection. Marcus met him at the base of the mountain and guided him up to the shepherd's door, with Astrid trailing behind. The chief engineer studied the pass with a critical eye, taking his own measurements and comparing them to Marcus's notes. Finally, he nodded. "Your survey is sound, Jennings." "Better than sound, it is excellent work. The board will want to know how you found this route when the original team missed it entirely." "I had help," Marcus said. He gestured to Astrid. "Miss Nordheim provided essential local knowledge. She knows this mountain better than anyone." The chief engineer looked at Astrid properly for the first time, taking in her green skin and tusks. His expression did not change. "Is that so?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "Without her guidance, I would never have found the shepherd's door, and I would not have known about the subsurface drainage issues on the original route. Her contribution was invaluable. Then she will be credited in the final report, as I indicated." The chief engineer turned to Astrid. "The company owes you a debt of gratitude, Miss Nordheim. This route will save us considerable expense and provide a superior road for the region." Astrid did not know what to say. She had not expected thanks or recognition or anything beyond the preservation of her pasture. "I only showed him what was here," she managed. "That is more than most people do." The chief engineer made a note in his book. "Jennings, you will remain on site to supervise construction. The work crew will arrive next week. See that they follow the survey specifications exactly." "Yes, sir." The work crew turned out to be 20 men with picks and shovels, blasting equipment, and enough surveying stakes to fence a county. They set up camp in the valley below the Alp and began the slow, grinding work of cutting a road through the mountain. Marcus spent his days moving between the construction site and the cheese hut, checking grades and supervising the blasting, then coming home at night to help Astrid with the evening milking. The workers were curious about the orc woman the surveyor lived with, but Marcus shut down any rude comments with a coldness that surprised Astrid. She had not known he could be stern. "They have no right to talk about you that way," he said one night, scrubbing mud off his boots. "If they cannot be civil, they can keep their mouths shut. I am used to it. That does not make it acceptable." Astrid smiled despite herself. "You are very fierce when you are angry, only about things that matter." As the road took shape, so did their life together. Marcus moved his things down from the loft, and they shared the rope bed, learning the easy intimacy of sleeping side by side. He taught her to read maps, and she taught him to recognize the plants that made good fodder. They argued about small things: who should fetch water, whether to add sage to the cheese, how much firewood was enough, and discovered that arguing could be a kind of closeness too, as long as it ended in laughter. In summer, the road reached the shepherd's door. The workers blasted a wide, level path through the rockfall and built retaining walls to hold the eastern slope. The first wagon crossed in late summer, driven by a merchant who stopped at the cheese hut to buy provisions. "You are the orc woman who found this pass?" he asked, counting out coins for a wheel of cheese. "I showed the surveyor where it was," Astrid said carefully. "Well, it is a damn sight better than the old valley route. Cuts half a day off the trip, and the grade is so smooth my horses barely notice the climb." He hefted the cheese. "I will be back next month. This is good quality." After he left, Marcus pulled Astrid into a hug. "Do you know what this means? Travelers will be coming through regularly. You could sell cheese and provisions all season. You could expand your herd, hire help, build a proper wayhouse." "I do not need a wayhouse. But you could have one, if you wanted." Astrid thought about it. The idea of dealing with travelers made her uneasy, but the merchant had been polite enough, and the income would be steady. And if Marcus was right, if the road brought regular traffic, she would not have to rely solely on the spring cheese sales to survive. "Maybe," she said, "if you help me build it." "Of course I will help." They began planning that night, sketching designs for an addition to the hut that could house travelers and store larger quantities of cheese. Marcus drew elevations and calculated materials, and Astrid figured out how to expand her herd without overgrazing the pasture. By autumn, the road was complete. The chief engineer returned for the final inspection, pronounced the work satisfactory, and announced that the route would be officially named the Nordheim Pass in honor of the woman who had found it. Astrid stood with Marcus on the ridge above the shepherd's door, watching the engineer and his crew pack up their equipment. Below them, the new road stretched in a graceful curve, following the line she had shown Marcus months ago. "They named it after me," she said, still not quite believing it. "You deserve it. This is your pass, Astrid. You saved it, and now everyone will know." She looked at him, at the man who had come to her mountain as an enemy and stayed as something infinitely more precious. "We saved it," she said. "Together." Marcus took her hand. "I have something to ask you." "What?" "My contract with the road company ends in 6 months. After that, I will be free to work as an independent surveyor or to do something else entirely." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I would like to stay here, permanently. Help you run the wayhouse, guide travelers through the pass, maybe do small surveying jobs for local farmers. But only if you want me to." Astrid felt her heart kick. "You want to stay? I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to build a life here with you on this mountain. I know it is not what you planned, and I know it will be strange for people, but I do not care about any of that. I just care about you." She stared at him, her mind racing. Marriage, a life together, a future she had never allowed herself to imagine. "Yes," she said. Marcus blinked. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you. I want that too." He laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like hope and cheese and the thin mountain air. When they finally broke apart, they were both grinning like fools. "We should wait until spring," Astrid said. "After the snow closes the pass. That way it will just be us, and we will not have to deal with travelers or workers or anyone else." "Spring it is," Marcus agreed. "Though I should warn you, my sister will insist on coming once the pass opens again. She will want to meet you." "Will she be angry?" "That you are marrying an orc. She will be thrilled. She has been nagging me to settle down for years." He kissed her forehead. "Stop worrying. Everything is going to be all right." And against all odds it was. They married in early spring, a week after the last snow. The ceremony was simple, conducted by a traveling priest who happened to be passing through and did not seem bothered by the bride's green skin. They exchanged vows in front of the cheese hut, with the mountains as their witness, and Marcus slid a silver ring onto Astrid's finger. "I love you," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I love you too," Astrid replied, and meant it with every part of her heart. Marcus's sister arrived 2 weeks later, along with her printer husband and their 3 loud, curious daughters. The girls were fascinated by everything: the cows, the cheese, the mountains, and especially Astrid herself, whom they peppered with questions until their mother made them stop. "I apologize for them," Marcus's sister said, pulling Astrid aside. "They have never met an orc before and they have no manners." "It is all right," Astrid said. "They are just curious." "Well, thank you for being patient with them, and thank you for making my brother happy. I have not seen him smile like this in years." After they left, Astrid and Marcus began the work of building the wayhouse addition. They worked through the summer, hauling stone and timber, raising walls and fitting roof beams. The construction was hard, but they were both used to hard work, and there was a satisfaction in building something together. By autumn, the wayhouse was finished. 4 sleeping rooms for travelers, a large common area with a hearth, and a cool cellar for storing cheese. Astrid stocked it with provisions and hired a girl from the valley to help with the cooking and cleaning during the busy season. The first winter they spent alone, snowed in and content, learning the rhythms of married life. Marcus kept the fire going and repaired tools while Astrid tended the herd and made cheese. In the evenings they read together, or played cards, or simply sat by the fire and talked about their plans for the coming year. "You ever regret it?" Marcus asked one night, watching the snow fall outside the window. "Tying yourself to a wandering surveyor?" Astrid looked at him, at his familiar face and his ink-stained fingers and the way the firelight caught in his eyes. "No," she said. "Not for a moment." "Good," Marcus said and kissed her. "Neither do I." Spring came, and with it the travelers. The wayhouse did steady business, and Astrid found that she did not mind the work as much as she had feared. Most people were polite, and the ones who were not learned quickly that the orc woman who ran the pass was not to be trifled with. Marcus took on surveying work for local farmers, helping them map their land and plan irrigation systems. He was good at it, and people recommended him to their neighbors, so the work kept coming. He also began teaching Astrid how to use the surveying instruments, and she discovered that she had a knack for it. "You are better at this than I was when I started," Marcus said one afternoon, watching her sight an angle with the transit. "I have a good teacher," Astrid replied. 2 years after they married, Astrid realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She told Marcus that night, and he picked her up and spun her around until she was dizzy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as though he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby," Astrid agreed, and felt her terror ease a little under the weight of his happiness. Their daughter was born in early spring, small and squalling and perfect. She had Marcus's brown eyes and Astrid's green skin, and when she wrapped her tiny hand around Astrid's finger, Astrid felt something in her heart expand beyond measure. "What should we name her?" Marcus asked, cradling the baby with awkward tenderness. "Bella," Astrid said. "It means beautiful." Marcus looked up at her, his eyes bright with tears. "It is perfect." Bella grew into a curious, fearless child who loved the mountains as much as her mother did. She learned to milk cows and make cheese, to read the weather and find her way through the high country. Travelers who stopped at the wayhouse were charmed by the little girl with the green skin who served them cheese, and asked endless questions about where they were going. 2 years after Bella, Astrid gave birth to a son they named Thomas. He was quieter than his sister, thoughtful and careful, with his father's patience and his mother's practical sense. He liked to watch Marcus survey, copying the measurements into his own notebook with serious concentration. Life on the pass settled into a good rhythm. The wayhouse prospered, the herd grew, and the family thrived. Marcus and Astrid worked side by side, raising their children and serving the travelers who crossed Nordheim Pass. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep and the wayhouse was quiet, Astrid would think back to that first summer when Marcus had driven a stake into her pasture, and she had caught the mallet on its backswing. She would think about how close she had come to losing everything, and how a chance encounter with a surveyor had changed the course of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus would ask, pulling her closer. "How lucky I am," Astrid would say. "We both are." And it was true. They had built something together, a home, a family, a life on a mountain pass that everyone said was impossible. They had proven that love could cross boundaries people thought were fixed, that an orc woman and a human man could build something that lasted. On Bella's 10th birthday, they stood together on the ridge above the shepherd's door, watching a caravan of wagons roll through the pass. The children ran ahead, chasing each other through the grass, and Marcus slipped his arm around Astrid's waist. "Do you remember the first time I brought you up here?" he asked. "Of course. You were looking for another route and you thought I was beautiful. I did not just think it, I knew it." He turned her to face him, his expression soft. "You are beautiful, Astrid. You were beautiful then, and you are beautiful now, and you will be beautiful when we are old and gray and our children are running this wayhouse." Astrid smiled, the words settling over her like a blessing. She had heard him say it 100 times since that first day, but it still made her heart swell. "You told me that twice," she said, remembering. "That first time when I found your drawings. You said I was beautiful, and then you said it again when I asked if you were mocking me. I remember. You stared at the floor and could barely look at me. I thought you were making fun of me. No one had ever called me beautiful before." "They were fools," Marcus said firmly. "Every single one of them, maybe, but you were not." She kissed him, quick and sweet. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me stay." They stood together on the mountain, watching their children play and the sun set over the valley below. The pass was busy with travelers, the wayhouse was full, and the future stretched out before them like the road they had built together. Long and winding and full of possibility. It was not the life Astrid had expected. But it was the life she had chosen, and it was more than she had ever dared to hope for. She had a home, a family, and a partner who saw her for who she truly was. She had proven that an orc woman could be beautiful, could be valued, could be loved. And that, in the end, was everything.